Hi, guys. Welcome to Wednesday. It is our Wednesday evening reading, and we are still doing Irish fairy tales. Um, this is another pre recorded story. Um, Last week we had open house, and today, let's see if it is 7:30. It's been a few hours since I married my niece, and it is so exciting. And it is a huge honor to get to do that for them. So, yeah, an exciting new chapter for the family. And I just can't wait to see these kids. Um, Man, she's awesome. She is everything I want to be when I grow up. So, yeah, so lots of love right now, and I'm feeling it. Feeling it, feeling it. I hope you guys are too. I hope somebody has told you today that they love you. And if not, I love you. I'm so glad you're here. I hope that you are enjoying these stories. If you are just watching these till we get to Nathaniel Hawthorne, you may not have to wait very long. We've got um, just a few left in our fairies and sea folks. Ooh, no, we're going to keep going on this. Sorry, I just saw what the next section is supernatural forces. So that should be perfect, taking us into Samhain. Yeah, we may add some additional nights if we are getting close and we want to finish this, or there are specific stories that we want to do closer to Halloween, Samhain, whatever you celebrate. Or if, I think we need to do the Legend of Sleepy Hollow. So I will take a look at that and see how many chapters it is. Unless you guys have a favorite Halloween story. It is getting that time of year that we are going to start watching all of the Halloween cartoon specials. And by we, I mean me. The bug might be a little too old to watch the old Halloween cartoons with his mom. But that's okay. I'll watch them by myself. I'll get a gallon of apple cider and put it in the slow cooker with all the goodies and watch all the old Halloween cartoons. What's your guys' favorite? I know, so the Charlie Brown one, it's the Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown. That's great. The Garfield Halloween with the spooky pirates, that's pretty good. But yeah, there's a ton of them. So you guys tell me your favorites in the comments, and maybe we'll do that. I still want to do the separate side channel with of course I haven't seen that because people are constantly amazed by the amount of things that I have not watched. I just haven't. I was a sitcom girl growing up. So there's a lot of stuff that I missed. A lot of movies that when I was going through like strictly rom-coms, I missed. I just missed them, and they have fallen by the wayside. So I am looking forward to doing that and seeing what you guys think I should watch. Or, yeah, I think that would be fun. Whether we do a full you watch with me reaction or just a summary reaction after is yet to be determined. But we'll see what you guys want to do. So all of that digression aside, just soda tonight. I'm thirsty. So tonight we are reading The Field of Boliauns and Taming the Pooka. So those are our two stories tonight. We'll get going on those, and I hope you guys enjoy. The Field of Boliauns. One fine day in harvest, it was indeed Lady Day in harvest, that everybody knows to be one of the greatest holidays in the year, Tom Fitzpatrick was taking a ramble through the ground and went along the sunny side of a hedge when all of a sudden he heard a clacking sort of noise a little before him in the hedge. "Dear me," said Tom, "but isn't it surprising to hear the stone chatters singing so late in the season?" So Tom stole on, going on the tops of his toes to try if he could get a sight of what was making the noise, to see if he was right in his guess. The noise stopped, but as Tom looked sharply through the bushes, what should he see in a nook of the hedge but a brown pitcher that might hold about 1.5 gallons of liquor, and by a little wee teeny bit of an old man, with a little motty of a cocked hat stuck upon the top of his head, a deeshy-doshy leather apron hanging before him, pulled out a little wooden stool and stood up upon it, and dipped a little piggin in the pitcher, and took out the full of it, and put it beside the stool, then sat down under the pitcher, and began to work at putting a heel piece on a bit of brogue just fit for him. Excuse me. "Well, by the powers," said Tom to himself, "I often heard tell of the leprechauns, and to tell God's truth, I never rightly believed in them. But here's one of them in real earnest. If I go knowingly to work, I'm a made man. They say a body must never take their eyes off them, or they'll escape." Tom now stole on a little further, with his eye fixed upon the little man just as a cat does with a mouse. So when he got up quite close to him, "God bless your work, neighbor," said Tom. The little man raised up his head and said, "Thank you kindly," said he. "I wonder you'd be working on the holiday," said Tom. "That's my business, not yours," was the reply. "Well, maybe you'd be civil enough to tell us what you got in the pitcher there," said Tom. "That I will, with pleasure," said he. "It's good beer." "Beer?" said Tom. "Thunder and fire! Where did you get it?" "Where did I get it, is it? Why, I made it. And what do you think I made it of?" "Devil a one of me knows," said Tom. "But of malt, I suppose. What else?" "There you're out. I made it out of heath." "Of heath?" said Tom, bursting out laughing. "Sure you don't think me to be such a fool as to believe that." "Do as you please," said he, "but what I tell you is the truth. Did you never hear tell of the Danes?" "Well, what about them?" said Tom. "Why, all the about them there is that when they were here, they taught us to make beer out of the heath, and the secret's in my family ever since." "Will you give a body a taste of your beer?" said Tom. "I'll tell you what it is, young man. It would be fitter for you to be looking after your father's property than to be bothering decent, quiet people with your foolish questions. There now, while you're idling away your time here, there's the cows have broken into the oats, and are knocking the corn all about." Tom was so taken by surprise with this that he was just on the very point of turning around when he recollected himself. So, afraid that the like might happen again, he made a grab at the leprechaun, and caught him up in his hand. But in his hurry he overset the pitcher, and spilt all the beer, so that he could not get a taste of it to tell what sort it was. He then swore that he would kill him if he did not show him where his money was. Tom looked so wicked and so bloody-minded that the little man was quite frightened. So says he, "Come along with me a couple of fields off, and I'll show you a crock of gold." So they went, and Tom held the leprechaun fast in his hand, and never took his eyes off of him, though they had to cross hedges and ditches and a crooked bit of bog, till at last they came to a great field all full of Boliauns. And the leprechaun pointed to a big Boliaun, and says he, "Dig under that Boliaun, and you'll get the great crock all full of guineas." Tom in his hurry had never thought of bringing a spade with him, so he made up his mind to run home and fetch one. That he might know the place again, he took off one of his red garters and tied it round the Boliaun. Then he said to the leprechaun, "Swear you'll not take that garter away from that Boliaun." And the leprechaun swore right away not to touch it. "I suppose," said the leprechaun very civilly, You have no further occasion for me? No, says Tom. You may go away now, if you please, and God speed you, and may good luck attend you wherever you go. Well, goodbye to you, Tom Fitzpatrick, said the leprechaun, and much good may it do you when you get it. So Tom ran for dear life till he came home and got a spade, and then away with him as far as he could go, back to the field of Boliauns. But when he got there, lo and behold, not a Boliaun in the field but had a red garter, the very model of his own, tied about it. And as to digging up the whole field, that was all nonsense, for there were more than 40 good Irish acres in it. So Tom came home again with his spade on his shoulder, little cooler than he went, and many's the hearty curse he gave the leprechaun every time he thought of the neat turn he had served him. Well, yep. Don't be rude. Don't be rude. And if they tell you you're being rude, listen. Fairy folk, leprechauns, they're going to get you. One way or another. One way or another. So, I've never heard of a Pooka. I don't know if you guys have. So we may actually do 2 more stories, just because they have to do with the same creature. So we've got Taming the Pooka and then the Kildare Pooka. So we'll read both of those. Yeah. So I hope you guys like that first story. Again, it's another one where there is a moral. A lot of these Irish fairy tales, well, fairy tales in general, we all know have like a moral or something, a lesson of some sort to learn. So let's see what the legend of the Pooka is. Taming the Pooka. The west and northwest coast of Ireland shows many remarkable geological formations, but, excepting the Giant's Causeway, no more striking spectacle is presented than that to the south of the Galway Bay. From the sea, the mountains rise in terraces like giant stairs, the layers of stone being apparently harder and denser on the upper surfaces than beneath. So the lower portion of each layer, disintegrating first, is washed away by the rains, and a clearly defined step is formed. These terraces are generally about 20 feet high and of a breadth varying with the situation and exposure of from 10 to 50 feet. Okay, so you guys can picture that? Steps, and then steps, and steps. Okay. The highway from Ennis to Ballyvaughan, a fishing village opposite Galway, winds by a circuitous route. By a circuitous course through these freaks of nature, and on the long descent from the highland to the sea level, passes the most conspicuous of the neighboring mountains of the Corkscrew Hill. The general shape of the mountain is conical. The terraces composing it are of wonderful regularity from the base to the peak, and the strata being sharply upturned from the horizontal, the impression given is that of a broad road carved out of the sides of the mountain and winding by an easy ascent to the summit. "'Tis the Pooka's path, they call it," said the carman. "Fat's the Pooka? Well, that's not easy to say. It's an evil spirit that does be always in mischief, but sure it never does serious harm except unto them that deserves it, or them that spakes it spakes av it disrespectful." I'm sorry, guys. This is written, this is written in the, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is. I guess the speech pattern of the carman. So I'm going to read it the way it's written, and we're going to hope for the best. Okay? Just go with me. "I never seen it, glory be to God, but there's them that has, and be the same token, they do say that it looks like the finest black horse that ever wore shoes. But it isn't a horse at all, for no horse would have eyes of fire, or be breathing flames of blue, with a smell of sulphur, save in your presence, or a snort like thunder, and no mortal horse would take the lapes it does, or go as fur without getting tired. Sure, when it give Tim O'Brien the ride it give him, it went from Gort to Athlone with one jump, and the next it took he was in Mullingar, and the next was in Dublin, and back again by way of Kilkenny and Limerick, and never turned a hair. How far is that? Faith, I don't know. But it's a power of distance, and clane across Ireland and back. He knew it was the Pooka, because it spoke to him like a Christian mortal. Only it isn't agreeable in its language, and I'll never give ye a decent word after you're on its back, and sometimes not before either. Oh, okay, he's gonna keep going. We're gonna keep going. I love you guys. Sure, Dennis O'Rourke was after coming home one night, and it was only a boy I was, but I mind him telling the story, and it was at a fair in Galway he'd been. He'd been having a sup, some says more, but when he come to the Rath, and just beyond where the fairies dance, and furninced the wall where the policeman was shot last winter, he fell in the ditch, quite spent and tired completely. It wasn't the length as much as the wideness of the road was in. It wasn't the length as much as the wideness of the road was in it, for he was going from one side to the other, and it was too much for him entirely. So he laid still for a bit, and then tried to get up, but his legs were light, and his head was heavy. And when he attempted to get to his feet, and the road was his head that was in it. And when he attempted to get to his feet, and the road was his head that was in it, because his legs couldn't balance it. Well, he laid there, and was bet entirely, and while he was studying how he'd raise, he'd heard the throttin' have a horse on the road. "'Tis meself will get the lift now," says he, and laid waiting, and up comes the Pooka. When Dennis sees him, begob, he kivered his face with his hands, and turned on the breast of him, and roared with fright like a bull. "Arrah, then, you snake and blackguard," says the Pooka, mighty short. "I'll have your ball in, or I'll kick ye to the end of next week," says he to him. But Dennis was scared, and bellowed louder than afore, so the Pooka, with his hoof, give him a crack on the back that knocked the wind out of him. "Will you laugh off," says the Pooka, "or will I give you another, you roaring dough-face?" Dennis left off blubbering, so the Pooka got his temper back. "Stand up, you guzzling serpent," says the Pooka. "I'll give you a ride." "Plaise your honour," says Dennis, "I can't. Sure, I've not been after drinking at all, but smoking too much and eating. And it's sick I am, and not intoxicated." "Oh, you drunken buzzard," says the Pooka. "Don't offer for to deceive me," lifting up his hoof again and giving his tail a swish that sounded like the noise of the cataract. "Didn't I thrack you for 2 miles be your breath," says he, "and you're smelling like the potheen factory," says he. "And the nose on your face is red as the turkey cocks. Get up or I'll lift you," says he, jumping up and cracking his hind foot like he was doing a jig. Dennis did his best, and the Pooka helped him with a grip of his teeth on his collar. "Pick up your caubeen," says the Pooka, "and climb up. I'll give you such a ride as you never dreamed of." "If it's pleasing to your honour," says Dennis. "I'd laver walk. Riding makes me dizzy," says he. "'Tis not pleasing," says the Pooka. "Will you get up, or will I kick the stuffing out of your cowardly carcage?" says he, turning round and flourishing his heels in Dennis's face. Poor Dennis tried, but he couldn't, so the Pooka took him to the wall and gave him a lift up. And when Dennis was mounted and had a tight hold on the mane, the first lep he gave was down the rock there, 1,000 feet into the field, you see, then up again and over the mountain, and into the say and out again, from the top of the waves to the top of the mountain, and after the poor Soggarth of a ditcher was nigh onto dead, the Pooka came back here with him and dropped him in the ditch where he found him. and blowed in his face to put him to sleep, so lavin him. And they found Dennis in the morning and carried him home. No more could he walk for a fortnight, be raising of the weakness of his bones for the ride he'd had. But sure, the Pooka's a different beast entirely to what he was afore King Brian Boro tamed him. Never heard of him? Well, he was the king of Munster and all Ireland and tamed the Pooka, once for all the Corkscrew Hill Fernandsty. Okay, guys. Whew. Should have looked a bit more closely at this one. You see, in the old days, the country was full of evil spirits and fairies and witches and devils entirely. And the harem they done was on Sason, for they were always coming and going, like Mulligan's blanket, and without so much as saying by your leave. The fairies would be dancing on the grass every night by the light of the moon, and stealing away the children, and many's the one they took that never came back. The old rath on the hill beant was full of the dead, and after nightfall they'd come from their graves and walk in a long line one after another to the old church in the valley, where they'd go in and stay till cock-crow. Then they'd come out again and back to the wraith. Sorra a parish without a witch, and some nights they'd have a great entertainment on the Corkscrew Hill, and you'd see 'em, with snakes on their arms and necks and ears, big way of jewels, and the eyes of dead men in their hair coming for miles and miles, some riding through the air on sticks and bats and owls, and some walking, and more on Pookas and horses with wings that had come up in line to the top of the hill, like the cabs at the door of the theatre, and leave them there and hurry off to bring more. Sometimes the old enemy, Satan himself, would be there at the entertainment, coming in a monstrous dragon, with green scales and eyes like the lightning in the heavens, and a roaring fiery mouth like a lime kiln. It was the great day then, for they do say all the witches brought their raperts and them Sasons for to show him what they'd done. Some would tell how they'd stopped the weather in the spring and inconvenienced the neighbors. More would show how they dried the cow's milk and made her kick the pail, and they'd all laugh like to spilt. Some had blighted the corn. More had brought the rains on the harvest. Some told how their enchantments made the children fall ill. Some said how they set the thatch on fire. More told how they stole the eggs, or spilt the cream in the churn, or bewitched the butter so it wouldn't come, or led the shape out of the bog. But that wasn't all. One would have the head of a man murdered by her mains, and with it the hand of hung, and have him hung for the mother. One would bring the knife she'd scuttled a boat with, and paint in the say to where the corpses laid of the fishermen she drowned. One would carry on her breast the child she'd stolen and meant to bring up an evil. And another one would show the little white body of a baby she'd smothered in its sleep. And the corpse candles would tell how they deceived the traveler, bringing him to the river. And the evil spirits would say how they drew him in and down to the bottom in his sins, and then to the pit with him. And old Beelzebub would listen to all of 'em, with a reporter, like them that's after taking down the spacious at a lag meeting, be aside or writing what they said, so as when they come to be paid, it wouldn't be forgotten. Them were the times for the Pookas too, for they had power over them that went forth after night, excepting it was on an errant of mercy they were. But sorra a sinner that hadn't been to his duty regular ever see the light of day again after meeting a Pooka then. For the baste should either kick him to smithereens where he stood, or lift him on his back with his teeth and jump into the sea with him, then dive, laving him to be drowned, or spring over a cliff with him and tumble him to the bottom of a bleeding corpse. But wasn't there the howls of joy when a Pooka would catch a sinner unbeknownst and fetch him on the corkscrew when of the night Satan was there? Oh, God defied us, what a sight it was. They made a ring with the corpse candles, while the witches tore him limb from limb, and the fiends drunk his blood in red-hot iron noggins with shrieks of laughter to smother his screams, and the Pookas jumped on his body and trampled it to the ground, and the tempest did whistle a tune, and the mountains about it kept time, and the Pookas and witches and spirits and evil, and corpse candles and bodies of the dead, and devils all would jig together round the rock where old Beelzebub would sit smiling, as for to say he'd ax no better diversion. God's presence be with us, and makes me creep to think of it. Well, after I was saying, in the time of King Brian, the Pookas done a deal of harm, but as them that they murdered were drunken basties that were in the shebeens in the day and in the ditch at night, and wasn't missed when the Pookas took 'em, the king paid no attention, and small blame to him that is. Small blame to him that is. Okay. But one night, the queen's baby fell ill, and the king says to his man, says he, "Here, Riley, get you up and on the white mare and go for the doctor." "Musha then," says Riley, and the king's country horse was in the break of the hills, so Riley had passed the path and the corkscrew on the way after the doctor. "Musha then," says he, easy and on the quiet, "it's meself that doesn't want the same job." So he says to the king, "Won't it do in the morning?" "It will not," says the king to him. "Up, you lazy beggar. Eat me bread and the life leaving me child." So he went, with great slowness, took the white mare and off, and that was the last seen of him or the mare either, for the Pooka took 'em. Sorra a taste of a lies in it, for them that said they seen him in Cork 2 days after, trading off the white mare, was deceived be the spirits that made it seem to be him when it wasn't that they've got a trick of doing. Well, the baby got well again, because the doctor didn't get there. So the king left bothering after it and began to wonder about Riley and the white mare, and searched for them but didn't find them. And then he knew that they were gone entirely, because you see, the Pooka didn't love as much as an hair of the mare, didn't leave as much as a hair of the mare's tail. "Where then," says he, "is it horses that the Pooka will be stealing? Bad cess to its impudence. This'll never do. Sure will be ruinated entirely," says he. Mind ye now, it's my concept from what he said that the king wasn't concerned much about Riley, for he knew that he could get more Irishmen when he wanted them. But what he meant to say was that if the Pooka took to horse stealing, he'd be ruinated entirely. So he would, for where'd he get another white mare? So it was a mighty serious question, and he retired within himself to the court, with a big book that he had told secrets. So a diary. He had a sight of learning, had the king, equal to a schoolmaster, and a head that'd circumvent a fox. So he'd read and read as fast as he could, and after reading without stopping, barring for the bit of sup, for 7 days and nights he come out. And when they asked him could he bait the Pooka now, he said never a word, except in a wink with his eye as for to say he had him. So that day he was in the fields and along the hedges and ditches from sunrise to sunset, collecting the materials of a dose for the Pooka. But what he got, faith, I don't know. But no more does anyone, for he never said, but kept the secret to himself and didn't say it even to the queen, for he knew that secrets run through a woman like water in a ditch. That's how we pass along information. But there was one thing about it that he couldn't help telling, for he wanted it, but couldn't get it without help. And that was 3 hairs from the Pooka's tail, except in which the charm wouldn't work. So he told a man he'd give him no end of gold if he'd get them for him. But the felly pulled off his caubeen and scratched his head and said, "Faith, your honor, I don't know it'll be good to me to have the gold if the Pooka gets a crack at me carcage with its hind heels." And he wouldn't undertake the job on no wages. So the king began to be afeard that his loaf was dough. But it happened of the Friday, this being a Tuesday, that the Pooka caught a sailor that hadn't been on land only long enough to get bilin' drunk, and got him on his back. So jumped over the cliff with him, leaving dead enough, I go bail. When they come to search the sailor to see what he had in his pockets, they found 3 long hairs round the 3rd button of his top coat. So they took him to the king, telling him where they got him, and he was greatly rejoiced, because now he believed he had the Pooka sure enough. So he ended his enchantment. But as the evening come, he rose a doubt in his mind, and him this way. If the 3 hairs were out of the Pooka's tail, the charm would be good enough. But if they wasn't, and was from his mane instead, or from a horse instead of a Pooka, the charm wouldn't work, and the Pooka would get a top. The charm wouldn't work, and the Pooka would get a top of him with all the feet he had, and once it'd be the death of him immediately. So this nate and appropriate argument struck the king with great force, and for a bit he was honesty. But with a little circumvention he got round it, for he confessed and had absolution so as he'd be ready. Then he told a man with the servants to come in and tell him after supper that there was a poor widdy in the boring beyond the corkscrew that wanted help that night, that it'd be an errand of mercy he'd be on, and so safe that the Pooka if the charm didn't hold. So safe again the Pooka if the charm didn't hold. "Sure, what'll be the good of that?" says the man. "It'll be a lie and won't work." "Don't you be antsy in your mind," says the king to him again. "Do as you're told, and don't argy, for that's a point of metaphysics," says he. Fexer was a dale in deep learning he had. "That's a point of metaphysics, and the more you argy on them subjects, the less you know," says he. And it's true for him. Besides, even if it's a lie, it'll deceive the Pooka, and that's no metaphysician. And it's my belief that in the end is good enough for the mains, says he, a-thinking of the white mare. So, after supper, as the king was setting afore the fire, and had the charm in his pocket, the servant came in and told him about the widdy. "Be gob," says the king, like he was surprised, so as to deceive the Pooka completely. "If that's true, I must relieve her at once." And so he rise up and put on soldier boots, with spurs on 'em a foot across, and took a long whip in his hand, for fear, he said, the widdy'd have dogs. Then went to his chest and took out his old stocking and got a sovereign out of it. Och, 'twas the sly one he was, to do everything so well. It went out with his right foot first, and his spurs a-rattling as he walked. He come across the yard, and up the hill beyond, and round the corner, but seen nothing at all. Then up the footpath round the corkscrew, and met niver a soul but a dog that he cast a stone at. But he didn't go out of the road to the widdy's, for he was afeard that if he met the Pooka, and he caught him in a lie, not being in the road to where he said he was going, it'd be all over with him. So he walked up and down betwixt the old church below there and the rath on the hill, and just as the clock was striking for 12, he heard a horse in front of him, as he was walking down. So he turned and went the other way, getting his charm ready, and the Pooka came up after him. "The top of the morning to your honor," says the Pooka, as polite as a Frenchman, for he seen be his close that the king wasn't a common blackguard like us, but he was one of the rale quality. "Me service to you," says the king to him again, as bold as a ram. And when the Pooka heard him spake, he got politer than ever, and made a low bow and scrape with his foot. Then they went on together and fell into discourse. "'Tis a black night for travelling," says the Pooka. "Indeed it is," says the king. "It's not me that'd be out in it if it wasn't a case of necessity. I'm on an errand of charity," says he. "That's real good of ya," says the Pooka to him. "And if I may make bold to ax, what's the necessity?" "Oh, 'tis to relieve a wedding woman," says the king. "Oh ho!" says the Pooka, a throwing back his head laughing with great pleasantness, and nudging the king with his leg on the arm. Beways that it was a joke, it was, because the king said it was to relieve a wedding he was going. "Oh ho!" says the Pooka. "'Tis meself that's glad to be in the company of an illigent gentleman that's on so pleasant an errand of mercy," says he. "And how old is the witty woman?" says he, busting with the horrid laugh he had. "Mercy thin," says the king, getting red of the face and not liking the joke the least bit. For just between us, they do say that afore he married the queen, he was the laddie buck with the women. And the queen's maid told the cook, that told the footman, that said to the gardener, that told the neighbours, that many's the night the poor king was as wide awake as a hare from sun to sun, with the queen a gossering at him about that same. No idea what I just said. Here's the laddiebuck with the women. More betoken, there was a witty in it, that was as sharp as a rat trap and surrounded him when he was young and hadn't as much sense as a goose, and was like to marry him at once in spite of all of his revelations, as widdies understand how to do. So it's my consent that it wasn't decent for the Pooka to be after laughing that way, and shows that evil spirits is dirty blackguards that can't talk with gentlemen. "Musha, thin," says the king, because the Pooka's laughing wasn't agreeable to listen to. "I don't know that same, for I never seen her, but be jaggers, I believe she's 100, and as ugly as Beelzebub. And when her old man was alive, they tell me she had a temper like a gander, and was as easy to manage as an armful of cats," says he. "But she's in want, and I'm after bringing her a sovereign," says he. Well, the Pooka ceased his laughing, for he seen the king was very vexed, and says to him, "And if it's pleasing, where does she live?" "At the end in the boring beyond the corkscrew," says the king very short. "Becob, that's a good bit," says the Pooka. "Faith, it's true for you," says the king. "More betoken, it's uphill every foot of the way, and me back is broke entirely with the stapeness," says he. Beway of a hint that he'd like a ride. "Will your honour get up upon me back?" says the Pooka. "Sure, I'm after going that away, and if you don't mind getting a lift," says he, a falling like the stupid baste he was into the trap the king had made for him. "Thanks," says the king. "I believe not. I've no bridle nor saddle," said he. "Besides, it's the spring of the year, and I'm afeard you're shedding, and your hair'll come off and spoil me new breeches, says he, letting on to make excuse. "Have no fear," says the Pooka. "Sure, I never drop me hair. It's no ordinary garrin of a horse I am, but a most uncommon base that's used to the quality," says he. "Your speech shows that," says the king, the clever man that he was, to be polite that away to a Pooka that's known to be a devil out and out. "But ye must excuse me this evening, because, do you mind, the road's full of stones and monstrous stape, and you look so young, I'm afeard you stumble and give me a fall," says he. "Dara thin," says the Pooka. "It's true for your honour, I do look young." He began to prance on the road, giving himself airs like an old witty man after wanting a young woman. "But me age is older than ye suppose." "How old did you say I was?" says he, smiling. "Begorra, a devil a bit I know, says the king. "But if it's agreeable to you, I'll look in your mouth and give you an answer," says he. So the Pooka came up to him fair and soft, and scratched his mouth, like as he thought the king was wanted for to climb in. And the king put his hand on his jaw like he was going to see the teeth he had. And then, that minute, he slipped the 3 hairs around the Pooka's jaw. And when he done that, he drew them tight and said the charm, crossing himself the while. And immediately the hairs were cords of stale, and held the Pooka tight, by way of a bridle. "Arrah, now, ye bloody base of a murthering devil, ye," said the king, pulling out his big whip that he had concealed in his topcoat, and giving the Pooka a crack with it under his stomach. "I'll give ye a ride you won't forget in a hurry," says he. "Ye black Turk have a 4-legged niggering to stalling me white mare," says he, hitting him again. "Oh my," said the Pooka, as he felt the grip of iron on his jaw and knew he was under an enchantment. "Oh my, what's this all?" rubbing his breast with his hind heel where the whip had hit him, and then jumping with his 4 feet out to catch the air and trying to break away. "Sure, I'm ruined, I am. So I am," says he. "It's true for you," says the king. "Begob, it's the one true thing you ever said," says he, jumping on his back and giving him the whip and the 2 spurs with all his might. Now I forgot to tell you that when the king made his enchantment, it was good for 7 miles round, and the Pooka knew that same as well as the king, and so he started like a constable was after him. But the king was afeard to let him go, thinking he'd do the 7 miles in a jiffy, and the enchantment would be broken like a rotten string. So he turned him up the corkscrew. "I'll give you all the exercise you want," says he, "and traveling around this hill." And round they went, the king sticking the big spurs in him every jump and cracking him with the whip, till his sides run blood and streams like a mill race, and his screams of pain were heard all over the world, so that the King of France opened his windy and asked the policeman why he didn't stop the fighting in the street. Round and about the corkscrew went the king, a lashing the Pooka, till his feet made the path ye see on the hill, because he went so often. And when morning come, the Pooka asked the king what he'd let him go for, and the king was getting tired, and told him that he must never stale another horse, and never kill another man, barring furrin blackguards that wasn't Irish. And when he give a man a ride, he must bring him back to the spot where he got him and leave him there. So the Pooka consented, glory be to God, and got off, and that's the way he was tamed, and explains how it was that Dennis O'Rourke was left by the Pooka in the ditch just where he found him. More betoken, the Pooka's an altered beast every way, for now he drops his hair like a common horse, and it's often found sticking to the hedges where he's jumped over. And they do say he doesn't smell half as strong as sulphur as he used to, nor the fire out of his nose isn't so bright. But all the king did for him, it wouldn't take him to be civil in his speech. And when he meets you in the way, he speaks just as much like a blackguard as ever. And it's out of devilment entirely he does it, because he can be polite, as you know by what I told you, and have him saying to the king, and that proves what I said to you, that evil spirits can't learn real good manners, no matter how hard they try. But the fright he got never left him, and so he keeps out of the highways and travels by the footpaths, and so isn't often seen. And it's my belief that he can do no harm at all to them that fears God. And there's them that says he never shows himself, nor meddles with man, nor mortal baron there in drink. And maybe there's something in that too, for it doesn't take much drink to make a man see a good deal. Wow. That was rough, guys. I'm so sorry. Okay. So, yeah, that was all in a particular dialect, and I apologize. I've not taken good enough lessons. But I hope y'all got a couple of good laughs at that one. So we'll read the next one because it is literally 2 pages. This one is the Kildare Pooka. Mr. Henry Roth, when he was alive, used to live a good deal in Dublin, and he was once a great while out of the country on account of the 98 business. But the servants kept on in the big house at Rath, all the same as if the family was at home. Well, they used to be frightened out of their lives after going to their beds with the banging of the kitchen door, and the clattering of irons, and the pots and plates and dishes. One evening they sat up ever so long, keeping one another in heart with telling stories about ghosts and fetches, and that when, what would you have of it, the little scullery boy that used to be sleeping over the horses and could not get room at the fire crept into the hot hearth, and when he got tired of listening to the stories, sorra fear him, but he fell dead asleep. Well and good, after they were all gone and the kitchen fire raked up, he was woke with the noise of the kitchen door opening and the trampling of an ass on the kitchen floor. He peeped out, and what should he see but a big ass, sure enough, sitting on his carabingo and yawning before the fire. After a little while he looked about him and began scratching his ears as if he was quite tired, and says he, "I may as well begin first as last." The poor boy's teeth began to chatter in his head, for, says he, "Now he's going to eat me." But the fellow with the long ears and tail on him had something else to do. He stirred the fire, then he brought in a pail of water from the pump and filled a big pot that he put on the fire before he went out. He then put out his foot, into the hot hearth and pulled out the little boy. He let a roar out of him with the fright, but the Pooka only looked at him and thrust out his lower lip to show how little he valued him, and then he pitched him into his pew again. Well, he then lay down before the fire till he heard the boil coming on the water. Maybe there wasn't a plate or a dish or a spoon on the dresser that he didn't fetch and put into the pot, and wash and dry the whole bilin of 'em, as well as ever a kitchen maid from that to Dublin town. He then put all of them on their places on the shelves, and if he didn't give a good sweep into the kitchen, leave it till again. Then he comes and sits foment. Then he comes and sits foment the boy, let down one of his ears, and cocked up the other, and gave a grin. The poor fellow strove to roar out, but not a dig had come out of his throat. The last thing the Pooka had done was to rake up the fire and walk out, giving such a slap at the door that the boy thought the house couldn't help tumbling down. Well, to be sure, if there wasn't a hullabaloo next morning when the poor fellow told his story. They could talk of nothing else the whole day. One said one thing, another said another, but a fat, lazy scullery girl said the wittiest thing of all. "Musha," says she, "if the Pooka does be cleaning up everything that way when we are asleep, what should we be slaving ourselves for doing his work?" Says another, "Them's the wisest words you ever said, Coth. It's meself won't contradict you." So said, so done. Not a bit of a plate or dish saw a drop of water that evening, and not a besom was laid on the floor, and everyone went to bed soon after sundown. Next morning everything was as fine in the kitchen, and the Lord Mayor might eat his dinners off the flags. It was great ease to the lazy servants, you may depend, and everything went on well till a foolhardy gag of a boy said he would stay up one night and have a chat with the Pooka. No! He was a little daunted when the door was thrown open and the ass marched up to the fire. "And then, sir," says he, at last picking up courage, "if it isn't taking a liberty, might I ask who you are, and why are you so kind as to do half of the day's work for the girls every night?" "No liberty at all," says the Pooka, says he. "I'll tell you, and welcome. I was a servant in the time of Squire R.'s father, and it was the laziest rogue that ever was clothed and fed, and done nothing for it. When my time came for the other world, this is the punishment was laid on me. To come here and do all this labor every night and then go out in the cold. It isn't so bad in the fine weather, but if you only knew what it is to stand with your head between your legs, facing the storm from midnight to sunrise on a bleak winter night. And could we do anything for your comfort, my poor fellow, says the boy. Musha, I don't know, says the Pooka. But I think a good quilted frieze coat would help keep the life in me them long nights. Why then, in truth, we'd be the ungratefullest of people if we didn't feel for you. To make a long story short, the next night, but 2, the boy was there again. And if he didn't delight the poor Pooka, holding up a fine warm coat before him, it's no matter. Between the Pooka and the man, his legs was got into the 4 arms of it, and it was buttoned down to the breasts and the belly. And he was so pleased he walked up to the glass to see how he looked. Well, says he, it's a long lane that has no turning. I am much obliged to you and your fellow servants. You have made me happy at last. Good night to you. So he was walking out, but the other cried, Ugh, so you're going too soon. What about the washing and sweeping? Ah, you may tell the girls that they must now get their turn. My punishment was to last till I was thought worthy of a reward for the way I'd done my duty. You'll see me no more. And no more they did, and right sorry they were for having been in such a hurry to reward the ungrateful Pooka. Okay, so I guess a Pooka is like a spirit that is into any kind of a equine form. Maybe I should have researched that. But we can look it up. And we'll put it in the comments. Either the comments or the description. So look in both places. We'll look and see what an actual Pooka, P-O-O-K-A, means. That is it for tonight. So we did 3. And so next week is the 10th. Should be back live. Unless you guys prefer this format. I know, I keep putting it on you guys, and you're saying, Katie, just do what you like. Katie, just do what you like. That's scary. But anyway, I'll try. Yeah, so have a wonderful week. Be kind to each other. Like, subscribe, share, do the whole deal. And I'll see you guys soon. I love you. Bye.